So everyone's favorite liberal apologist, Elizabeth Warren, is coming to blackmail us with Donald Trump saying that we need to vote for Joe Biden even though he's not listening to us. I was very annoyed with this interview because it just paints Donald Trump as black and white, pretending that he didn't actually do any good things and he's not trying to build his coalition with African American voters or doing anything as far as just trying to expand the MAGA movement. Also, I'm not even a fan of Donald Trump, but he definitely was witch hunted for 4 years of his presidency. And Joe Biden definitely has a messaging issue as well because he accomplished a lot that he's not getting credit for as well.
And B, that even with all those vulnerabilities, it's competitive, if not Trump in the lead against Biden.
So let's do the first part. Donald Trump's supporters are Donald Trump's supporters. Ask them. Many of them are election deniers. They're in with Donald Trump all the way. But here's the part that I think is really important. Donald Trump really hasn't done anything in the last 3 years to try to expand the number of people to join the Trump family. And I think what this is going to come down to is going to just be a comparison. We're already there. And we're going to have two people who both have been president and who will have records to run on. So Donald Trump, basically 4 years as president, did two things. One, he got an extremist Supreme Court that overturned Roe versus Wade. And two, he got biggest tax cut in a zillion years, $2 trillion, mostly sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and giant corporations. Joe Biden.
Okay, so there's two things I already have a problem with. Number one, Donald Trump is actually getting the minority vote more than any other Republican in recent history. So to pretend he's not expanding his sphere of voters is just not true. But also, to say he didn't pass anything besides a giant tax cut for the rich, or to say that he appointed 3 judges on the Supreme Court, which ultimately overturned Roe versus Wade, this is true. But at the same time, he passed the First Step Act, which helped get nonviolent criminals out of our jail. And guess what? That largely benefited minorities. Also, incomes of minorities went up during the Trump presidency. So to say he did nothing else besides suck up the corporations and to the rich is just not true. But I also think that, number one, I'm not an election denier. I think Joe Biden won the election. And the reason I think Trump reacted the way he reacted, he was witch hunted for 4 years and impeached. And he thought to himself, well, they're just cheating to get me out of office. I don't think he realized, not being a career politician, there's cheating that goes on, illegality that goes on all the time in every election. Mitch McConnell even acknowledged this, saying that this is something that just happens. But it doesn't mean the cheating actually would have affected the results overall. So, no, I'm not an election denier. I think Joe Biden actually won the presidency.
3 years has managed to cut costs for working families. So now there's $35 insulin. 4 million people have seen their student loan debt canceled. And he has also brought more fairness to the tax code. First time we have a 15% minimum corporate tax on these billionaire corporations, and largest climate package in the history of the world. So I think what they've done is going to be a big part, certainly not all of it, but a big part of how this election is going to shape up.
Senator, one of the things you just said was...
I do think Joe Biden has kind of gotten the short end of the stick. He has done some good things for people to be like, oh, he hasn't done anything. Well, the Chips and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, getting us $1,400 checks at the beginning of his presidency. Stop pretending that every president is just either good or bad. It's like Donald Trump. He's a mixed bag. He did some good things, including not really start any new wars, which is actually a positive in his category. He's not a warmonger, to his credit. At the same time, Donald Trump's rhetoric has always been terrible, and it's not very presidential, and it's really violating norms to actually have this dude as president. I think the reason the powers that be do not like Donald Trump is because they kind of see him as a national embarrassment. They're like, we don't want this image to be our image to the rest of the world. But unfortunately, we live in a democratic republic, and we elect our representatives, and it's a very real possibility he'll be president. Do I think he's particularly dangerous? I think the worst thing Donald Trump did in his presidency was not concede the election. We have not had that happen before. And that sets a very dangerous precedent, being like, are we now going to have presidents who run and then they lose and are going to be like, well, I don't think I lost. And this opens up the door for future presidents who you like or don't like. So say if you like Donald Trump, let's say Joe Biden wins the next election, Donald Trump's going to say he won either way. And then we're going to probably have a constitutional crisis because of all this bullshit. This is in part of the Democrats' fault because they didn't actually allow for a robust primary for Joe Biden. And say he would have won anyways, he at least would have gotten practice in debating other people on his policies. And he's actually Like I said, I think he's not been given enough credit for some of the good things he did, but I also think they don't want to give Donald Trump credit for some of the things he did. Right now we have two wars on different fronts: Israel plausibly committing a genocide, and we have the Ukraine war. Anytime something bad happens, the president gets all the blame. Is it necessarily Joe Biden's fault that both these wars broke out during his presidency? No, but you're the president of the United States. You get all the glory and all the blame. And the problem is Joe Biden is significantly feeling his age, more than Donald Trump is. And I think anyone who's fair can see that. Not that Donald Trump isn't having his own gaffes because of his age, but for us to think that Joe Biden is not being affected more by his age is just bias, and you're not willing to see. He's literally talking to dead people.
That Donald Trump hasn't done anything to expand his base or his electorate.
Not true.
What they are trying to do in the Trump campaign is very much encroach on traditionally Democratic voters, Black voters, Hispanic voters. Some of the things that you just said are the arguments, of course, we expect the Biden campaign to make going forward. There is some frustration in Democratic quarters that those kinds of arguments aren't coming more specifically and loudly from the president himself.
So I think what you're saying is the president needs to brag more.
I'm asking you.
I think he should brag more. I think he's got plenty to brag about. Thursday's going to be the State of the Union. I hope he does a lot of bragging. I also hope that he talks about the things he wants to do, like universal child care and housing, the things we need to work on. But here's the thing I think most of all. I hope that what we're going to see is just Joe Biden being Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden ultimately has got a good heart. I know who Joe Biden fights for. Joe Biden gets out there every day and fights for people like the diabetic who has gone from paying $200 a month to $35 a month, for the person getting crushed by student loan debt, the public school teacher who just can't pay off those debts. He's out there fighting for those people. He's fighting for people who wanted a job and now have got a job. That's Joe Biden. Trump, who does he fight for? Donald Trump.
All right, let's go back to the beginning of his presidency. He did get us $1,400 checks. However, he lied. He said it was going to be $2,000, but he just used the $600 that was passed by Trump to, quote, get us $2,000. So he lied right off the bat. Number two, all the things he listed are actually positive things that Joe Biden should be bragging about more. And there is a messaging problem there as far as actually listing what he actually has accomplished. He isn't giving us a clear path on what he wants to accomplish in his second term. And the biggest thing I'm really mad at Joe Biden for is he talked about getting us all a public option for healthcare. He didn't even try for this. He just propped up Obamacare and just gave more money to insurance companies, and hopefully they'll do the right thing. Does it seem like they're doing the right thing? Healthcare costs are out of control now. Joe Biden, in my mind, is just a typical Democrat. He just tries to get us the things that incremental changes that around the edges, but things like a public option that would really help everyone's healthcare situation, or at least attempt to help other people's healthcare situation. No, we're not even going to try for that. We're just going to give money to insurance companies.
First and last.
I don't think I'm giving you any news you don't know, but there are a lot of warning signs going off on how effectively Joe Biden is going to be able to rebuild the coalition that got him elected in 2020. A lot of progressives, a lot of Muslim Americans and Arab Americans in Michigan, certainly, but not only them, other progressives upset with the way he supported Netanyahu during this war. I know that a lot of Democrats are really worried about those voters, 100,000 in Michigan who voted uncommitted, not voting for Trump, but either staying at home or going third party, going for Cornel West, going for Jill Stein, going for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Do you notice the framing here? Only progressives are mad about the ceasefire situation in Gaza because I'm a conservative Democrat. I think the government should be out of the business of most of our lives as far as I think the government should be really small. The only thing you could say that I'm, quote, liberal on is I think we should have a public option for healthcare. As far as student loan debt, I didn't have any student loans, so that doesn't affect me. But I don't think that the government should guarantee loans. That's part of the reason that we even have this exploding cost in college education. So that's the biggest problem as far as government intervention is concerned. But I don't think it's fair to say that the only people who want a ceasefire in Gaza are just progressives. That's not true. A majority of Democrats want there to be a ceasefire in Gaza, and even a healthy chunk of Republicans want there to be a ceasefire in Gaza. You notice how Trump hasn't actually said anything about this situation? That's because he's actually street smart. He knows that this is a very divisive issue, and he's like, well, I'm just not going to say anything, even though I already know Donald Trump would be just as bad as Joe Biden is on supporting Netanyahu 100%. And that might not exactly be true, because Donald Trump actually hates Benjamin Netanyahu. He literally said, fuck this guy. And so Joe Biden has embraced Netanyahu 100%, supported him 100%, and said all these things behind the scenes being well, Benjamin Netanyahu's an asshole. What are you going to do about it, Joe? Because you're clearly not doing anything other than just words.
How worried are you, and what do you say to those voters to get them to come home?
So I want to start in a different place because for me, this isn't about politics. This is ultimately about doing what's right. I understand that there are extraordinarily passionate feelings about what has happened in Gaza, what has happened in Israel. People feel very engaged and very invested. And the key is that we're all trying to drive to the same place. And that is, we need a permanent, peaceful solution in the Middle East. Look, we got 4 things we need to do, and we need to do them right now. We need those hostages returned. We need a ceasefire. We need to open up so that there is plenty of humanitarian aid flowing in. And we need to push leadership so that it's moving toward a permanent peace. That is a 2-state solution. That is 2 places for 2 peoples who can live in peace with dignity, security, and who can have self-determination for their futures.
Those are some really nice things to say of Elizabeth Warren. Too bad the coalition within Netanyahu's government has already said we will never allow a 2-state solution. And Joe Biden isn't pushing back on that at all. So there will be no 2-state solution. Netanyahu is a religious zealot. Even Obama said, be careful about this dude. This dude believes in like prophecies and shit like this. And then we have Hamas, who are religious extremists on the other end. And that's why there's not going to be peace, because neither one will accept the other one's existence. You have people online saying that, you know, if the Israelis laid down their arms, they would be gone. If Hamas laid down their arms, there would be a 2-state solution. No, there wouldn't. And also, you know, Netanyahu actually propped up Hamas and actually said we should fund Hamas, so there is no 2-state solution. And both Obama and Trump have said Netanyahu doesn't want peace. He hasn't offered peace, and he just wants permanent occupation and war.
As much as wrong, there's a sliver of hope that this moment opens up, that other countries in the region are ready to push. The United States, we need to push hard, and we need to push those parties toward a peaceful solution. That's where we want to get. We need to push harder to get there.
I don't like how they're constantly just blackmailing us with Donald Trump. The worst part about the Trump presidency is he did not concede the last election when he did lose. So is he going to do it again? Or is he just going to be like, after he wins again, he's going to be like, hey, I beat Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. I'm a rock star. I'm going to ride off into the sunset.